Chapter 9. Look at me when I'm talking to you. Crosstalk across the ages. One source of inspiration for this book was a research project I participated in, dealing with how friends talk to each other at grade levels ranging from second grade to university. Although I had not intended to examine gender differences, when I watched the set of videotapes recorded by Bruce Dowell, I was overwhelmed by the differences that separated the males and females at each age, and the striking similarities that linked the females on one hand and the males on the other across the vast expanse of age. In many ways, the second grade girls were more like the 25-year-old women than like the second grade boys. The two categories of differences between male and female speakers in the videotapes that were most striking to me were what the friends talked about and their body language, how they oriented themselves to each other with their bodies and eyes. Differences in physical alignment or body language leap out at anyone who looks at the segments of videotapes one after another. At every age, the women and girls sit closer to each other and look at each other directly. At every age, the boys and men sit at angles to each other, in one case almost parallel, and never look directly into each other's faces. I developed the term anchoring gaze to describe this visual home base. The girls and women anchor their gaze on each other's faces, occasionally glancing away, whereas the boys and men anchor their gaze elsewhere in the room, occasionally glancing at each other. The boys' and men's avoidance of looking directly at each other is especially important because researchers and conventional wisdom have emphasized that women and girls tend to be more indirect than boys and men in their speech. Actually, men and women tend to be indirect about different things. In physical alignment and in verbally expressing personal problems, the men tend to be more indirect. Teasing and telling stories at second grade. The two pairs of second graders provide the most obvious contrast in physical alignment and in what they talk about. The second grade boys, Kevin and Jimmy, move so incessantly that it seems the chairs they are sitting on can't contain them. They never look directly at each other. They look around the room, at the ceiling, and at the video camera set up in the room. They squirm, jump out of their chairs, rhythmically kick their feet, make faces at each other and the camera, and point to objects in the room. One boy continually pummels the arms of his chair. They sing, make motor sounds by trilling their lips, and utter nonsense syllables. And what are the boys talking about amid all this hubbub? They make a show of misbehaving by mugging for the camera, saying dirty words, laughing, and then clamping their hands over their giggles and shushing each other up. They tease. Jimmy tells Kevin over and over, "Your hair is standing up. Your hair always sticks up." And Jimmy tries to smooth his hair since he has no mirror to see that it looks just fine. They jump from topic to topic as they try to find something to do. What games does he have? For the second grade boys, something to do is games to play. For example, they look around the room in which they have been placed, Professor Dowell's university office, in search of games. Jimmy: "Look, you know what the game is over there? We had that in first grade." Jimmy: "What games does he have?" Kevin: "I don't know." Jimmy: "Probably only that. That's a dumb game, isn't it?" Kevin: "Looks pretty good though." Jimmy: "I can't wait until we play games." Since they can't find any games to play or don't feel they can help themselves to games they see in the room, they try to think of other things they can do. Jimmy: Well, if you have something to do, do it. Kevin. Here he comes back in. What would you like to do? Jimmy. Play football. Though he can't obviously do it right now, Jimmy has no trouble thinking of what he would like to do. Play football. He'd like to be outside, running around with a group of boys, not sitting in a chair talking to one friend. Since they can't be physically active now, they talk about being so in the future. Kevin says, "You want to come over to my house one day? Ride my bike?" The boys do find something to do, though it is not their first choice. In a tone that shows mock impatience, Jimmy demands that Kevin find something to do, and Kevin obliges, making a suggestion that the boys take up. Jimmy, would you find something to do? Kevin, patty cake. Jimmy, laugh. Look, patty cake. Come on, let's do patty cake. Come on. All these excerpts give the impression of young children with a lot of energy, much like any young children I might have thought until I viewed the videotape of two girls of the same age. The picture the second grade girls present seems truly to be of another world. Jane and Ellen sit very still, practically nose to nose for much of the time. One or the other or both sit at the edge of their chairs and they look directly into each other's faces. They calmly look elsewhere in the room only when they are thinking of what to say next. They do not cast about for something to do. They seem satisfied that they are already doing something, talking to each other. Looking at the two transcripts side by side shows how different these conversations are. Whereas the second grade boys' transcript is a mass of short spurts of speech, each boy's turn rarely taking more than a line. The transcript of second grade girls' conversation shows big blocks of talk, so that a single page of transcript might have one or two turns. This is because the girls are telling each other stories about things that have happened to them and other people. But these are not just any stories. They are about accidents and mishaps, illnesses and hospital visits. That's serious. Telling stories about misfortunes seemed to me a rather strange thing to do, until I realized that the girls were strictly following the orders they had been given. Dowell had instructed them, as he did the boys and all the other pairs of friends in his study, to consult each other and find something serious to talk about. When he left the room, the girls huddled and whispered and then separated, faced each other and began to exchange stories about things they considered serious. The stories in the following excerpt are rather short, but otherwise they are typical of the second grade girls' conversation. Ellen, remember when I told you about my uncle? He went up the ladder after my grandpa and he fell and cracked his head open. And you know what? It still hasn't healed. Jane, one time my uncle, he has like this bull ranch in Millworth and the bull's horns went right through his head. Ellen, that's serious. The way Ellen shows approval of Jane's story, that's serious, shows that telling stories about disasters was meant to comply with the instructions they had been given. Comparing the boys and girls of the same age, I had the feeling I was looking at two different species. The request to talk to each other about something serious seemed to make sense to the girls. They were asked to do something they often do by choice, sit together and talk. But the same request was a different one for boys, who are far less likely just to sit together and talk to each other in the course of their play. They are more used to doing things together, running around outside or playing games inside. Looking at the tapes from the perspective of status and connection or of oppositional versus supportive frameworks, I could see the patterns clearly. The boys who have identified each other as best friends show their affection for each other in an oppositional framework. Jimmy's repeated teasing, making Kevin think his hair is standing up when it's not, is one example. Jimmy also pretends to shoot Kevin, saying, "You're under arrest," and he says something intentionally mean. "I know William doesn't like you at all." Both boys play fight, taking harmless swipes at each other. Flouting authority. The boys continually show the awareness of the authority figure who has placed them in this situation. As in the brief example above, where Kevin says, "Here he comes back in." They seek to undercut the experimenter's authority by resisting what they have been told to talk about something serious and by playful defiance. For example, they jump up and make faces at the camera, then giggle and shush each other, pretending momentarily to look like good little boys. They invoke the experimenter to flout his authority when he is nowhere in sight, as when Jimmy says, and then made a fart, "Here he comes." Here, as elsewhere, their misbehavior seems aimed at the adult who has told them what to do. Since they were instructed to talk about something serious, what better way to avoid compliance than to tell jokes? This the boys do. Kevin. "Knock knock." Jimmy. "Who's there?" Kevin. "Fruit." Jimmy. "Fruit who?" Kevin. "Fruit bar." Jimmy. "What do you call a sleeping bull?" Kevin. "Bull chase." "What?" Jimmy. Well. Kevin. "I don't know." Jimmy. "Bulldozer. You get it? Bulldozer." Sometimes the jokes are scatological, and it is clear that they are breaking the rules of decorum with the adult authority in mind. Kevin. "Knock knock." Jimmy. "Who's there?" Kevin, jumping in his seat. "Knock knock knock knock." Jimmy. "Who's there?" Pause. "Toot toot. Toot toot who? You got toot toot in your panties." Kevin. "I don't either." Jimmy. "I wonder if he hears us." "He can. Just move your mouth." Both boys proceed to do so. This brief example has it all. Jimmy tells a joke. He teasingly puts Kevin down. He refers to a taboo subject. He shows his preoccupation with the authority figure who might object to their breaking these rules. And he defies and mocks the situation by pretending and getting Kevin to pretend to talk without producing sound. If telling jokes is a kind of performance that sets the teller at center stage, Jimmy is so exuberant in telling his toot-toot joke that he hogs the stage for the audience participation part as well, speaking all 4 lines of the knock-knock dialogue. On the other hand, he may simply be filling in for Kevin, who started the routine with knock-knock but didn't seem to have a joke in mind to follow through. Playing interview. Finding themselves sitting together and talking seems to suggest to these boys the hierarchical situation of being questioned by an adult. Play acting and mocking this framework, Jimmy takes the role of interviewer. Jimmy: "I've got 4 things to say." Kevin: "Yeah?" Jimmy: "I've got 4 things to say." Kevin: "Tell me." Jimmy: "You doing good in your schoolwork, huh?" Kevin: "Yeah." Jimmy: Play soccer good?" Kevin: "Uh-huh." Jimmy: "You're nice. What was the last one? How are you?" Kevin: "Fine." Jimmy: "It's your turn." Kevin's and Jimmy's turns are all very short. Just a few words with only 2 exceptions. One in which Jimmy explains a video game, and another in which he explains how to play patty cake, even though it was Kevin who proposed playing it. In both, he is taking the role of teacher. A world of difference. These are just a few examples of what is pervasive in the 20-minute videotape. The boys are physically restless. Their idea of what to do involves physical activity. They are continually aware of the hierarchical framework they are in, and they do what they can to mock and resist it. And they show their affection for each other in an oppositional format. They directly disagree with each other, but then disagreement is a natural response to the put downs and mock assaults that are initiated. For example, Kevin protests, "I don't either," when Jimmy tells him he has tutu in his panties, and "No, I'm not," when Jimmy tells him he is under arrest. The second grade girls' conversation in the same situation includes nothing that resembles any of the ways of talking just described for the boys. The girls, too, are aware of the authoritarian framework they are in, but they are complying with it rather than defying or mocking it. And far from playfully attacking each other, they support each other by agreeing with and adding to what the other says. Rather than colluding to defy authority, they assure each other that they are successfully complying, as when Ellen tells Jane, "That's serious," in contrast to the teasing by which each boy implies that the other is doing things wrong. The girls offer reassurance that they are doing things right. The brief stories that the girls tell in the excerpt above are also typical of the ways the stories are linked to each other and to the girls' shared experience. By starting out with "Remember?", Ellen reminds Jane that Jane was there or has heard the story before. Already in second grade, these little girls tell stories with the characteristic rising intonation that makes every phrase sound like a question. Like so many ways of talking that are characteristic of girls and women, when looked at from the perspective of status, this rising intonation could be interpreted as a request for approval, and therefore evidence of insecurity. But it could also be seen, and I think is more accurately seen, as a way of inviting the listener to participate by saying something like "uh-huh" or nodding. Jane also begins many of her stories by saying her friend's name, another mark of involvement. The short example above is also typical of the longer conversation in that Jane follows Ellen's story with a similar story. Jane's story matches Ellen's not only in being about an accident, but also in being about an uncle and a head wound. The second grade girls, like the boys, talk about future activities. But what they propose is different from what the boys propose. Whereas Kevin invites Jimmy to come over and ride his bike, Jane tells Ellen that she has just read a Bible story that she liked a lot. She says Ellen can come over to her house so that Jane can read it to her, or she can read it herself. Not only does Ellen propose a talking activity in contrast to Kevin's suggestion of a physical activity, but Jane also avoids framing Ellen as lower in status by assuring her that she can read the story herself rather than being read to if she prefers. Before the investigator entered the room and reminded them to talk about something serious, the girls were exchanging different kinds of stories. Like the women who tell troubles as a kind of report talk, these girls were exchanging matching complaints. For example, Jane complained that her little brother kept asking her to read stories to him but wouldn't let her finish any of them. He kept bringing out new books for her to start reading. Ellen responded with a matching story about reading to her brother. Only her problem was that he had chosen a long book, and each time she finished a chapter and thought she was done reading to him, he'd insist on hearing one more. Here they were, in second grade, establishing rapport by complaining about others who were close to them and supporting each other's stories. Men and women to whom I showed these videotapes had very different reactions to these second graders. My reaction was typical of women's. I thought Jane and Ellen were sweet little girls, and I smiled to see them. I was touched by their eagerness to fulfill the experimenter's request. My heart went out to them, but the little boys made me nervous. I wished they'd sit still. I thought they are joking silly, and I didn't like their teasing and mock attacks. I felt sorry for poor Kevin, who kept trying to smooth down his hair and was told that another little boy didn't like him. But men I showed the tapes to reacted very differently. They thought the boys cute, and they found their energy and glee touching. They were sympathetic to the boys' impulse to poke fun at the situation and defy the experimenter's authority. The girls seemed to them like a pair of goody two-shoes. Some men commented that they didn't trust the girls' behavior. They felt that little children couldn't really enjoy sitting so still. They must be on their best behavior to kiss up to the experimenter. So there it is. Boys and girls grow up in different worlds, but we think we're in the same one. So we judge each other's behavior by the standards of our own. Life imitates experiment. Nowhere are the consequences of these differences more striking than in elementary school, where the teachers expect children to sit quietly and do as they are told, like the girls in the videotaped I examined, and not to fidget and jump around and tease each other and resist orders like the boys. While reading a study of teaching style in a kindergarten class, I came across life support for the pattern I had noticed and described, as well as a dramatic illustration of the consequences of that pattern. Ethnographer Jane White studied what she calls the relentless politeness of primary school teachers. She begins an article with an excerpt from a lesson in which a kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Bedford, is introducing a social studies lesson. Mrs. Bedford says, "Oh my, what a nice-looking group of kindergartners. Oh, it makes Mrs. Bedford so happy to see such smiling faces. Now, are we all sitting comfortably? Pause. Let's see who is here. Looks like everybody's here. Our line leader for today is Mark W." Students talking among themselves. "Oh, I like the way Tammy and Barbara are sitting down. They're so ready for first grade. Oh, and Corey and Heather, how nice. And Colleen and Sherry, you look terrific. Joey, can you turn around so I can see your face? Stephen T, would you come sit up here by me? Bobby, find yourself a place there. Stephen S, right there is a good place for you. Is everybody comfortable? Are we ready?" White was not concerned with gender differences in her study. Her purpose in presenting this excerpt was to show that the teacher used polite ways of speaking, like praising good behavior rather than censuring bad, and phrasing directives as questions. But in reading this wonderfully graphic and familiar example, I noticed that all the children who were being praised for sitting quietly were girls, and all the children who were being criticized for not sitting still were boys. The same impression leaped out at me from another article as well, to show that elementary school teachers regard boys and girls as separate social groups. Sociologist Barry Thorne quotes a teacher who said, "The girls are ready and the boys aren't." Both these examples from real classrooms dramatize that school requires behavior that is more natural for girls than boys. In the previously mentioned study by Alice Greenwood of her preteen son and daughters talking to their friends over dinner, I encountered another example of real-life support for the patterns I observed in the videotapes of friends talking. Just as the second grade girls reassured each other, "That's serious. When the girls in Greenwood's study talked to their friends, a funny story was often supported by the reassurance, "That's really funny." Even more, the girls would begin to laugh appreciatively before a story was told. As soon as another girl announced her intention to tell a story by saying, "This is so funny." In contrast, the boy said, "A good conversation was one where we make jokes and crack on each other." Exactly what the second grade boys chose to do. These real life examples reassured me that the two videotapes I had studied were typical, not exceptional. But my findings are also supported by a battery of research on little girls and boys at play, which has documented the greater physical activity and aggressiveness of little boys, their greater tendency to end up in parallel rather than coordinated play, and their greater tendency to take oppositional stances. Developmental psychologist Campbell Leaper, for example, found that 5-year-old girls elaborate on each other's ideas in a mutually positive manner, whereas little boys of the same age exhibit negative reciprocity by which one boy tries to control and the other withdraws. In her study of 3 and 4-year-olds in a daycare center, Amy Sheldon found that even when the boys and girls engaged in individual activities with same-sex threesomes, the girls, unlike the boys, kept each other connected by calling out what they were doing and responding to the others' comments. If it is fascinating to see the source of adult patterns in second graders, it boggles the mind to see them in 3-year-olds. No wonder it is hard for men and women to understand each other's point of view. We have been looking at the view from different vantage points for as long as we have been looking. Trouble with people and things in 6th grade. The 6th grade girls and boys present as stark a contrast as the second graders. Walt, sitting in a high-backed wooden chair with arms, is also physically restless, but he shows it by squirming rather than jumping up and down and in and out of his seat. Walt twists all over his chair. At one point, he leans to the side and reaches one arm way down the side of the chair as if he were Rubber Man. The other boy, Tom, is physically fairly still, but he doesn't look comfortable either. He stretches out his legs in front of him, and much of the time he has one arm draped over the back of his upholstered chair. He is more stiff than still. These boys don't look at each other either. Walt rubs his eyes continually, creating a physical barrier to looking at Tom. He plays with his fingers, spending more time looking at them than at Tom. Tom too sits aligned with his chair, at an angle to Walt. They frequently look around, apparently searching for things to talk about and often finding them. For example, they comment on the decorations, "That's a funny looking picture," and later, "Dang, this is quite a picture." They notice a sprinkler in the ceiling and one boy explains to the other, "It's in case something catches on fire." Spotting his bag, Walt pulls out a new pair of shoes which they both look at, handle and talk about. Turning to the 6th grade girls. We are looking at a different scene altogether. Rather than aligning themselves with their chairs, the girls sit across the chairs in order to face each other directly. Shannon sits quite still at the edge of the wooden chair, with her arms resting on the arms of the chair. Julia sits in the upholstered chair without arms, but rather than spreading out from it like Tom, she draws her arms and legs up onto the chair. She puts her left ankle on the right knee, holds her foot, and plays with her shoelaces. She frequently glances at her foot, but her gaze is anchored on her friend's face, in contrast to Walt, whose gaze is anchored on his fingers. Julia and Shannon change their positions several times during their talk, but the changes are neither abrupt nor frequent, And the girls are always tightly and directly aligned with each other in gaze and posture. The boys at this age exude a sense of energy held in check. Walt's squirming and Tom's motionlessness both seem caused by discomfort. The girls seem comfortable with the level of movement allowed them, but the boys seem to be restraining themselves, as if they have learned that the level of energy they feel should not be expressed. Perhaps this contrast holds a clue to the stony quality of many men's stillness. What the boys and girls talk about is also as different as can be. In the 20 minutes of conversation, Tom and Walt touch on 55 different topics. They talk about school, homework, cable TV, sports, sex, and violence on TV. They don't approve of it. Things in the room, things they want, a motorbike, a computer, a shotgun. Other boys at school, Walt's shoes, a rock group they play in, inflation, Nancy Reagan's buying a dress for $3,000 they don't approve. Girls, guns, videos, and their friendship. None of these topics is pursued for more than a few turns, and each turn is short. Like the second grade boys' conversation, the sixth grade boys include only 2 extended turns, and they are both report talk, framing the boys as differently placed in a hierarchy. Tom sings a song he recently composed for their rock group, framing himself as the performer and Walt as his audience, and he tells about a bicycle accident he was in. It hurts when you lose your best friend. Again, moving from the 6th grade boys to the girls of the same age is like moving to another planet. The girls spend almost all their time talking about Julia's falling out with a third friend, Mary. Julia says how bad she feels about losing a friend. It hurts when you lose your best friend, a really close friend. The girls agree that the breakup was Mary's fault. Their talk reveals how central their friendships are to their world. Julia says, I like getting a friend and keeping it forever, and I couldn't live without a friend. Shannon agrees. I don't think anybody could live without a friend either. Julia declares to Shannon that they will be friends practically forever. Over and over, the 6th grade girls expressed their fear that anger disrupts friendships. Julia explains that her friendship with Mary ended because Mary got mad and was therefore mean. In contrast, she maintains that she herself does not get mad at people, even when she doesn't like what they do. Shannon: Too bad you and Mary are not good friends anymore. Julia: I know. God, she's so mean sometimes. And then what was so sad? She just gets mad at you all of a sudden. And like if she does something don't like. I don't like it. I don't get mad at her. Julia: My mom does things that I don't like a lot. And I don't get mad at her. Julia feels and fears that when people get mad, they fight, and fighting can lead to separation. At one point, she introduces what seems like a new and unrelated topic: her worry that her parents might get divorced. But it is really the same topic. She's afraid her parents will get divorced because she sometimes hears them fight. And she believes that one of the reasons Mary is such a difficult person is that her parents are divorced. Here again, I come across independent corroboration for these patterns in real-life dialogue among children of roughly the same age. The issue of getting mad turns up in a conversation between teenage girls taped by Deborah Lange. In that conversation, one girl tells about a problem. She would like to get all her friends together, but she can't because they don't all like each other. As she keeps repeating that she is not mad, she sounds a lot like Julia. I'm not mad at Dina or anything. I'm not mad at Millicent or Rita, but I always. It's so hard to make plans with all of them at once. Instead of being mad at her friends, she makes efforts to placate them all. Because Rita gets in fight with Millicent, and Dina thinks that Millicent's being a bitcher, and it's so mean because it's not fair because I try to I try to I try to make it so I can make plans with all of them. But I'd rather just that all of them got along than trying to I myself have to change. Not only does this excerpt show sixth grade girls sharing troubles talk about their relationships with friends, but it also shows that they want to avoid conflict and preserve harmony. I know. In the videotape of sixth grade girls, Shannon and Julia, like the second grade girls, reinforce each other's feelings. For example, Shannon repeatedly agrees with Julia about Mary. Here is what they say right after the excerpt, in which Julia says that Mary gets mad, whereas she doesn't. Shannon: she tries to upset people. Julia: she does, and she just sees me crying and everything. She just lets me suffer. Shannon: and she loves it. Julia: I know, she enjoys the whole thing. Shannon supports Julia's complaint about Mary by offering similar observations, and Julia incorporates Shannon's additions into her complaints. The same topic with a difference. Even when the sixth grade girls and boys talk about the same thing, what they talk about is different. For example, both pairs of friends begin by reporting what happened the night before. But Julia tells about a problem with her father, while Tom tells about a problem with the television. First, the boys. Tom: man, yesterday we were sitting and watching cable. Some big old jet came flying by. Sounded like he was going to land. Walt: laugh. Tom: then our cable went out yesterday. Walt: 2 hours too. And that was that. Now the girls. Julia: guess what happened last night? Shannon: what? Julia: I went, okay. Last night, my brother, by be okay. My dad said, Julia, you got a pickup by yourself. And I said, well, if my brother doesn't have to. So me and my dad got into a big fight and everything, you know? And oh God, I bit him. I couldn't believe it. Oh God. Shannon: oh my gosh, did he get mad? Julia: yeah, but not right now. Just I went in my room. I locked the door. Julia told about interacting with a person, her father, and Tom told about interacting with an object, the television. Her story is also longer than any turn produced by the boys at the same age. And it is talk about a fight, a primary female concern, because fights threaten intimacy. Another aspect of Julia's story that is typical of girls and women is that she recreates the drama of what happened between people by acting out what they said in dialogue. She takes on her father's voice. Julia, you got a pickup by yourself, and enacts her protest, well, if my brother doesn't have to. Because girls and women are concerned with conveying the emotional impact of what happened between people, they use dialogue to dramatize events more than men and boys do. When it's time to talk, you can't talk. Like the second grade girls, the sixth grade girls appear completely comfortable sitting and talking. But the sixth grade boys seem to be struggling to sit in their chairs and to find something to talk about. They say as much. Tom: I tried to think of what to say, 'cause we were on film. It's different. Walt: I know. Tom. When you're outside, you can. Walt. I know, I can scream, but not in an apartment. Tom. Or you can talk up a storm. Walt. Aha. Tom. When it's time to talk, you can't talk. Tom's mention of being outside as reference to the benefits of playing outside rather than inside. And he supports the idea with the example that it's okay to scream outside. But Tom seems to be referring to the world outside this artificial situation, commenting on the difficulty they are having in finding things to talk about when they are told to talk. These remarks show that Tom is aware that they are in a situation where they have been told what to do, and he suggests that this is part of the reason they are having trouble to find things to talk about. Though it is not as obvious and pervasive as with the second grade boys, Tom also mocks the situation with a joke. Smile, you are on candid camera. Even more dramatically, when Dover leaves the boys alone, following his brief reminder, Tom salutes, first subtly and apparently automatically, then in an exaggerated way, apparently mocking his own automatic sign of subordination. In response to the discomfort of being in the experimental situation, the second grade boys talk about the games they would like to play. The sixth grade boys imagine being out of this situation when they are grown up. The following example also shows the way they use the room to shift topics suddenly, something the girls never do. Tom. Man, I can't wait till I'm grown up. Walt. Yeah, I know what you mean. Tom. Get out of college. Go to the Marines. Get out of Marines. Go to the Air Force. Get out of the Air Force. Get married. Walt. Yeah, I can't wait till I'm 16 to get my car. Tom. I can't wait till I'm 17 to get married. Walt. Yeah, me too. Look at that thing over there. It is touching to see how the boys yearn to be grown up, even though they are a bit confused about what adult behavior they will undertake at what age. Nothing like this is said by any of the girls in the videotapes. I interpret it as an expression of the boys' discomfort at being children who can be told what to do, and I suspect it comes up here as a fantasy about a way to escape situations like this one. Although more briefly, a similar impulse is expressed by Kevin, one of the second graders, in an interchange about their ages. Though he isn't sure exactly what age he is and what that means, I'm almost 10, but I'm not 8 yet. Kevin reassures himself, I'm catching up with big people. The boys show more eagerness to be grown up so they can get out from under in the hierarchy. Contrasting concepts of friendship. Despite the striking differences between boys' and girls' conversations, it would be misleading to imply that there are no similarities in their styles and concerns. The differences are not absolute, but are of degree. For example, all these children are concerned with preserving their friendships. Here is what the 6th grade boys say about it. Tom. Seems like me and you do everything together. Walt. Yeah, we going hunting this Sunday, right? Tom. Seems like if we have something to do, if there's a fight, one of us would be on the same side. Or if we have an idea, me and you are automatically in it. And everyone else wants to go against you and everything. It's hard to agree without someone saying something to you. Walt. I know. Tom. 'Cause there's one group and then there's another. The good group is the one who always gets picked on. Though the boys, like the girls, comment on what good friends they are, there are differences in how they express it. First of all, the boys' discussion of their friendship is brief, and the topic doesn't come up again, whereas the girls' talk about their friendship goes on at length and repeatedly recurs. Tom's remark that he and Walt are good friends focuses on their doing things together, Seems like me and you do everything together. And fighting is central to their notion of friendship. Agreement between Walter and him, Tom says, automatically sparks opposition from others. His is an agonistic world, in which friendship is a matter of banding together against others. In contrast, Julia's claim that she and Shannon are good friends is based on mutual understanding and longevity. Julia: At least me and you have been knowing each other since kindergarten, and we know how each other are, and on not fighting with each other. Julia: Me and you never get in fights hardly, and on communicating. Julia: I mean, like, if I try to talk to you, you'll say, talk to me. And if you try talk to me, I'll talk to you. Comparing the conversation of these boys and girls in sixth grade, one can see the root of men's and women's complaints about communication in their relationship with each other. The boys do say a bit about their friendships and about other people, but most of their talk is about things and activities and opinions about social issues. The only object the girls handle and discuss is one that symbolizes their friendship. Julia asks Shannon if she has given her a friendship pin, and Shannon says yes. Julia then says she read that if you are really good friends, you give too. She then reaches into her bag and gives Shannon a second friendship pin. All the girls' talk is about friends, friendship, and feelings. They orchestrate this talk at a level of complexity and subtlety that is not seen in the sixth grade boys' talk. Merged and parallel conversations in 10th grade. Moving on to 10th grade, we come to a videotape that has been essential to my understanding of men's communication. The girls at this grade level are very much like the 6th grade girls. They sit drawn up into their chairs, they look straight at each other, and they talk about the problems one of the girls has with her mother and her boyfriend. The 10th grade boys, however, are different not only from the girls but from the younger boys. Their postures are the most extreme on the videotapes. They are sprawled out, almost reclining against the chairs they are supposed to be sitting in. Richard, like Tom in the 6th grade, is almost motionless, and he looks steadfastly ahead, as if he had been forbidden to look at his friend Todd, as Orpheus was prohibited to look back at Eurydice. Todd uses his feet to drag a swivel chair into place as a footstool and pushes it around with his feet as he looks ahead or around the room, only occasionally glancing at Richard. Someone viewing this tape commented that these boys look like they are riding in a car. Their bodies are parallel rather than facing each other, and they are both looking steadily ahead, one only occasionally glancing at his friend and the other almost never doing so. But turn up the sound, and this scene is transformed. The boys are not talking about impersonal topics, far from it. These are the boys whose conversation was presented and discussed in Chapter 2. They are exchanging the most intimate talk that I heard in any of Dorwell's videotapes. Whereas the girls talked about problems they had with other people, absent parties, these boys are confronting their relationship to each other. And one is revealing deep feelings of loss and hurt and longing. I know what's bugging me. As we saw earlier, Todd is feeling alienated. He feels left out at parties. He has no date for an upcoming dance and doesn't want to ask anyone he knows. He doesn't feel right with girls who like him, and he doesn't feel right with his buddies either. He pines for the past when he and Richard spent time alone together and talked more. Todd's complaint can be seen in the following excerpt. Todd: What the hell we supposed to talk about? I mean, I know what's bugging me. Richard: What's bugging you? Todd: Snicker: That we don't talk. Richard: Who don't talk? Todd: We're doing it again. Richard: What? Todd: Not talking. Richard: I know, well, go. Todd: We're not even making small talk anymore. Laugh. Richard. Right, okay. I mean, what can I say? I mean, if you meant everything you said last weekend and Jay meant everything said, Todd. Well, of course I did. But I mean, I don't know. I guess we are growing up. I mean, I don't know. I guess I live in the past or something. I really enjoyed those times when we used to stay up all night long and just, spend the nights over someone else's house. Just to talk all night. Richard. Mm-hmm. Todd. They were kind of fun. Richard. Yeah, that was fun. Todd. But now we are lucky if we say anything to each other in the hall. Richard. With a mock challenging intonation. Oh, all right. Todd. I'm serious. I remember walking in the hall and I'd say hi to you and you'd say hi there. Or sometimes you'll push me in the locker if I'm lucky. Laugh. Richard. Protesting. We talk. Todd. Not the same way anymore. Richard. I never knew you wanted to talk. Although most men for whom I have played this conversation comment that it is unusual, it nonetheless happened. What is most striking is the stark contrast, almost contradiction, between these boys' words and their body language. Though their words speak of intense involvement, their bodies are in careless, lounging positions. Are men disengaged? I told a family therapist about my observation that the girls looked directly at each other and aligned their bodies facing each other, but the boys looked anywhere but into each other's faces and positioned themselves at angles to each other. She commented, that always happens with the families I see. The men won't look at me, and they won't look at their wives. The men are always disengaged. But this pair of 10th grade boys who are not looking at each other are nothing if not engaged. They are super engaged, even when displaying disengagement non-verbally. For example, Richard stretches and rubs his face in an elaborate yawn when he says, I never knew you wanted to talk. Considering these videotapes of boys and girls at different ages and the situation described by the family therapist, I was struck by a massive imbalance. When a woman looks at her therapist and her partner, she is simply doing what she has always done, what feels natural and normal and right. But when a man is asked to look directly at his therapist and his wife, he is being asked to do something different, something he has little practice doing, something that might even seem wrong to do. Proclaiming men disengaged on the basis of their body language seems premature and unfair. They are being judged by the standards of a different culture. This is not to say that the men might not be disengaged, nor that it might not be beneficial for them to try looking straight at their wives and therapists when they talk to them, just that the interpretation of this disengagement is not warranted solely on the basis of indirect physical and visual alignment. Within the bounds of their own culture, there is a plenty of evidence of engagement in the body language of the 10th grade boys, ample evidence that they are attending and attuning to each other. Their motions are finely coordinated. They make similar movements in similar directions at the same time. They are acting in concert, creating ensemble, to borrow a term from Ron Scollin, or to borrow a concept from A. L. Becker, like two geese preening their feathers, seeming to ignore each other, but mirroring each other's movements in coordinated rhythm. Why would men and boys look outward, away from each other, and around the room, rather than directly at each other? A likely explanation is that looking directly at another man would seem like a hostile action, a display of threat, and looking directly at a woman might seem sexual, a display of flirting. A colleague who made a comment to this effect joined me where I was sitting. Finding a chair facing mine, he pulled the chair farther away and turned it at an angle. We both laughed because this instinctive gesture enabled him to sit at an angle to me, just like the boys and men in the videotapes I had shown him. Judged by the standards of women who look at each other when they talk together, men's looking away is a barrier to intimacy, a means of avoiding connection. But if men and boys avoid looking directly at each other to avoid combativeness, then for them it is a way of achieving friendly connection rather than compromising it. The 10th grade boys and girls' physical alignment can be interpreted as different ways of reaching the same goal, involvement, rather than as evidence that the girls are involved and the boys aren't. This symmetry parallels their different ways of accomplishing troubles talk. As we saw in Chapter 2, Nancy and Sally spend most of their time discussing Nancy's problems with her mother and boyfriend, and Sally responds to Nancy's complaints by reinforcing them. In contrast, Richard and Todd both tell of troubles, but they respond to each other's problems by downplaying and dismissing them. Though different from the girls' ways of responding to each other's problems, the boys' style of reassuring each other has its own logic. Like their postures, the boys' conversation positions them on parallel tracks. Each talks about his own concerns, while the other belittles them or even changes the subject. By women's standards, this shows a lack of caring about the other and his problems, but it can be a way to make the other feel better. Talking about a problem over and over may be a way of expressing concern, but it also might make the problem seem more serious. For example, if Nancy felt bad because she had to leave the party, Sally's telling her that everyone was stunned when she left might make her feel worse. But from another viewpoint, Sally is giving Nancy proof that the girls in the group care about her and missed her when she left. The 10th grade girls and boys present a vision of similar goals accomplished in different ways. Both show signs of discomfort with the situation and mock the instructions. Sally says, "Talk about Jerry. That's serious and/or intimate," and Todd remarks, "We have to get intimate." Both pairs do soon settle down and do just what they were told, though the girl's resistance, expressed as giggling and joking, lasts longer than the boys'. In fact, it continues for the first 5 minutes of the tape, at which point Dowles reminds them of their task. During this time, they tease one another, but a teasing put down is rescinded as soon as it is uttered. Sally says, laughing, "Dizzy." "No, you are not dizzy." If boys and girls are so different at 2nd, 6th, and 10th grade, what of the men and women in the 24 to 27-year-old range? Adult friends conversation. The videotapes of adult friends talking show a natural development of the young people's styles. Gone is the pressure cooker of emotions concerning themselves and their alliances. Gone is the preoccupation with parents and their authority. But palpably present are the differences in ways of aligning themselves to each other with their bodies and their talk. Let's look at the 25-year-old women. Although they seem comfortable with the experimental situation, they seem frustrated by their conversation. Their struggle arises because one friend feels the other has pushed the code of agreement too far. I know we've had arguments before. The strain of negotiating agreement and similarity is felt throughout the women's dialogue. Intriguingly, traces of a similar strain are found in the 6th grade girl's conversation too. In her eagerness to espouse harmony and eschew conflict, Julia stresses to Shannon that they never fight. Shannon briefly disagrees, pointing out that they do. Julia: Me and you never get in fights hardly. Shannon. To me long. Julia. We get in arguments, but not fights. Sometimes we do. Shannon. Like when we are playing hopscotch, we get in arguments and fight and. Julia. Right, but we don't get in fights. Shannon. But it. Shrugs. Not all Shannon's words are entirely audible, but it is clear that when Julia says she and Shannon do not fight, Shannon subtly disagrees. She says, like when we are playing hopscotch, we get in arguments and fight. But Julia insists that although they may have arguments which are trivial, they do not have fights which are serious, and Shannon quickly gives up the disagreement. This germ of dissent goes into a recurrent and controlling theme in the conversation between Pam and Marcia, the adult women in Dorwell's videotapes. Pam begins the conversation by saying that one thing she likes about Marcia is that Marcia always agrees with her. Pam seems to intend this as a compliment, a statement about why they are friends. Perhaps she is trying to justify why she selected Marcia to join her in the experiment. But Marcia seems to take the remark as a put down, an implication that she has no mind of her own. As the conversation proceeds, Marcia repeatedly claims that she disagrees with Pam, and Pam tries to dismiss the disagreement with the result that the conversation becomes an extended disagreement. Marcia. God, Pam, I know we have had arguments before. Marcia. We disagree on a lot of things, though. School, for instance. And since you have such a positive. Pam. Positive? You saw me a few minutes ago. Marcia. Yeah, well, no. You've got such a positive attitude. Pam. No, I don't. Marcia. See, that's one thing we do disagree on. Maybe I'm not a very confident person, I guess, and you have got my share. Pam. Well, what do you think of my computer science attitude right now? One down manship. One of the ways Marcia tries to prove that she and Pam disagree or are different is to point out that Pam is a better student and has more self-confidence. This sparks an intriguing display of one-down-manship. Pam claims not to be self-confident and not to be as good a student as Marcia says. On the other hand, she accuses Marcia of being a better student than she admits. Marcia. See, that's another thing. You're always I'm just so bad about this. I get into a class, and the highest I can really hope to get is maybe if I can get a B out of a course. I guess it's just been so long since I've gotten an A. Pam. That you don't think about it? Marcia. Yeah, well, I don't think that it's attainable. Pam. I don't either. Marcia. But Pam, every semester when we start school, it's like you talk about it though, that you've got to get an A in this course. Pam. A's? I get B's. I try, but I never get A's. I always get B's. Well, maybe except in my psychology courses, maybe, but not all of them. In this excerpt, Pam reinforces connection by offering Marcia the conclusion of her sentence. Marcia. I guess it's just been so long since I've gotten an A. Pam. That you don't think about it? And she tries to play I am the same. Marcia. Yeah, well, I don't think that it's attainable. Pam. I don't either. But Marcia does not want to grant Pam this sameness. Marcia. But Pam, every semester when we start school, it's like you talk about it though, that you have got to get an A in this course. Pam, however, sticks to her claim, saying that she doesn't really get A's, and if she does, it isn't often. Pam. A's? I get B's. I try, but I never get A's. I always get B's. Well, maybe except in my psychology courses. Maybe, but not all of them. Lack of achievement, like similarity and agreement, seems to be the commodity with which Pam is trying to barter for symmetrical connection to Marcia. As with Marcia's suggestion that Pam is confident, Pam seems to take Marcia's suggestion that she gets good grades as an accusation to be resisted rather than as a compliment to be accepted. As if in counterattack, Pam points out that Marcia did well in a religion class. You do well on the tests, 15 out of 15, whereas I hadn't even read those chapters. Symmetrically, Marcia disclaims merit. It's a lot of common sense. In this regard, too, the 6th grade girls' conversation contains the germ of this verbal game. Early in the conversation, they trade observations about how bad they are at ice skating. For the women and girls, agreeing and being the same are ways to create rapport. Excelling, being different, and fighting are threats to rapport. The boys are buying rapport too, but they buy it with a different currency. They don't fear disagreement, and they don't seem to need to declare themselves the same. But any strategy can be taken too far, and Marcia seems to resent Pam's assertion that she always agrees. The game of one-downmanship that these women play is reminiscent of a pattern in Iranian interaction that William Beeman calls getting the lower hand. But this game, Beeman explains, is intensely hierarchical in nature. By portraying himself as lower in status, an Iranian puts himself at the mercy of someone more powerful, who is thereby obligated to do things for him. It invokes a protector schemer. Though women at times may take a one-down position, so men will take care of them, the game the women in this videotape play seems to have a very different goal: to reinforce symmetry rather than asymmetry, to keep the scales even by lowering one's own side. Marriage, a serious enough topic. The 25-year-old men present a very different picture. They sit at angles to each other, looking starched or frozen stiff. Timothy almost never looks at Winston. Though Winston looks at Timothy when he is listening, he often looks away. And when he is speaking, he never looks at Timothy at all. The men show a great deal of discomfort and strain in choosing a topic to talk about. They are very earnest about the injunction to talk about something serious, and to them serious seems to mean something important in the world, about which they can make a substantive contribution. Here's what they settle on. Winston: how about marriage? Timothy: that's a serious enough topic. Winston: serious topic, and it doesn't receive a lot of attention. In discussing marriage, a potentially personal topic, they speak mainly in the abstract, making general statements without revealing anything personal. Timothy: why do you think so many marriages ain't making it? That's, a broad question. Winston: I think most people rush into it, for one thing. Just can't wait to get married. Timothy: I think people, a lot of people, and I'm not saying I do, but a lot of people don't have an adequate or a mature, definition in their lives of what love is. I don't know, 'cause a lot of strife, in my opinion, in marriages and relationships is because the person has the, selfish attitude. There are ways in which these men's conversation conforms to what has been protected for men, but in other ways it doesn't. According to the stereotype and the findings of some research, women talk is more hesitant, but Timothy hesitates and uses fillers like and in my opinion, giving the impression of insecurity or not being sure of what he is saying. It seems that the situation is making him uncomfortable. Yet, by speaking abstractly rather than personally, he conforms to expectations of men's as compared to women's speech. Later in the conversation, Timothy talks about his relationship with a woman he is dating. He says that he is considering marriage but has gotten no further than that. He is cautious because marriage is forever, and he is wary because women often try to rush men into marriage. Timothy then says, "You know, I don't just want to talk about my situation." After a pause, Winston responds, "Well, mine's with school, and school is just the epitome of being an unsettled person." Winston seems to be implying that he does not have a girlfriend because he is a student and therefore his life is unsettled. But he expresses this indirectly as a general statement about the situation he is in. Mine's with school. Timothy asks him the question indirectly by making a statement, "I just don't want to talk about my situation," rather than asking directly, "What about you?" In other contexts, for example, when trying to negotiate mutual preferences and decisions, women are often more indirect than men. But when it comes to talking about their personal relationships and feelings, many men are more indirect. A pretty shy attitude. A poignant example of indirectness occurs when Winston says that sometimes men become cautious about relationships because they have been hurt, or in his words, torched. I think a lot of people start off like when they are young. They might have the attitude of what they think is 100% give, and then they get torched, or what they think is torched. And it's liable to just, give them, a pretty shy attitude towards it for a long time. Winston seems to be implying he has been hurt and that is why he is not in a relationship now. But if this is what he means, he does not say it directly. He does not say anything about any relationships of his own. Follow the leader. Comparing the videotapes of men and women and girls and boys talking to their friends in this experimental setting provides evidence for the gender differences pattern. These conversations show girls and women working hard to create a community of connection, bonding through talking about troubles in their personal relationships and struggling to maintain their individuality in the face of pressure to agree. The boys and men are working hard to preserve their independence in a hierarchical world, to achieve intimacy within oppositional frameworks. But it would be misleading to imply that the girls' friendships are entirely egalitarian. An important aspect of these videotapes is the asymmetry in the alignments taken up by the two friends in each conversation. Among the second grade boys, Jimmy is clearly a leader. He has the only extended turns. He gives orders and instructions. He teases and he initiates most of the conversational moves. Of the sixth grade boys, Tom is a leader who raises most of the topics, is the main speaker, and takes the performer role in the two instances of report talk. Of the 55 topics covered in their interaction, Tom raises 40. Walt, who generally takes a contributing and a supporting role, raises 15 topics, of which 6 involve calling attention to the objects in the room. The situation presented by the girls is more complicated. The second grade girls are the only ones in whom there are no apparent asymmetries in the footings they assume. The alignments taken up by the 6th grade and 10th grade girls are strikingly asymmetrical, even though much of what they say seems intended to achieve the appearance of agreement, support, and connection. Of the 6th graders, Julia seems to be the leader. Of 14 topics discussed, she raises 12. Most of the discussion centers around her relationship with Mary, her concerns about keeping friends, and her anxiety about separation and loss. when the experimenter briefly enters the room at the 5-minute mark, Julia is the one who talks to him. Yet it is Shannon who chooses the topic of Julia's relationship with Mary by saying, "Too bad, you and Mary are not good friends anymore." Similarly, most of the 10th grade girls' conversation is about Nancy. But it is Sally who suggests that they talk about Nancy's problems. In response to Nancy's questions, "Well, what do you want to talk about?" Sally says, "Your mama. Did you talk to your mama?" In terms of the number of the topics raised, the girls seem fairly balanced. Sally raises 9 topics, Nancy 7. However, all but one of the topics Sally raises are questions focused on Nancy. Much previous research on topic control assumes that raising a topic is a sign of dominance in conversation. From this point of view, Sally controls the conversation when she raises topics, although even this is subject to Nancy's collaboration in making it a topic by picking it up. Can she really be said to dominate, though, if the topics she raises concern Sally? In some ways, the 10th grade boys' conversation is more symmetrical than the girls'. Nancy and Sally talk entirely about Nancy's problems, but Richard and Todd both tell about their own problems, and both respond by downplaying or dismissing the others. Among the adult men and women, Pam is a kind of leader. She tends to set the themes to which Marcia reacts. Yet the recurrent question of whether or not they disagree becomes a theme because of Marcia's response to Pam's opening observation that Marcia always agrees with her. The adult men present a similar paradox. The topic of marriage is suggested by Winston, and he is the one who talks to Dorval when he comes in. But 6 of the 7 subtopics by which they actually discuss marriage are chosen by Timothy. Does talking more about her problems put a girl in a higher status position since she is taking up more conversational space? Or does it put her in a lower one since she is being portrayed as the one with problems? No one would suggest that the patient has more status or power in a psychotherapy session, even though she or he does most of the talking and raises all the topics. Does raising the topic imply dominance in the sense of controlling the conversation if the topic raised is of primary concern to the other girl? I don't know the answers to these questions, but I would know more if I knew whether these girls habitually apportion the roles of trouble-steller and supporter in these ways, or if they reverse roles in different conversations. At any rate, it is clear that issues of dominance and control are far more complex than be captured in surface descriptions such as who raises topics. And although the girls and women are focused on connection and the boys and men on status, there are nonetheless asymmetries among the women and girls and symmetries among the men and boys. In all their complexity, these videotapes show that from the earliest ages through adulthood, boys and girls create different worlds which men and women go on living in. It is no surprise that women and men who are trying to do things right in relationships with each other so often find their partners wanting and themselves criticized. We try to talk to each other honestly, but it seems at times that we are speaking different languages, or at least different genderlects.